As a young kid, I thought the soldiers were fantastic. It was the best thing since sliced bread.
Going to Bosnia 4 times and Kosovo twice, it's quite a drain. I was fortunate enough to not see real active service.
They show you what the true you looks like once you scrape all the layers off, and it was really revealing.
My happiest time was with 8 Squadron.
The public's knowledge of the army is abstracted. Little is understood into why one would sign up and what it is like to live in the lifestyle of a soldier. The community in the army has been made into its own bubble, one that is another world away from the civilian bubble. And 30 years ago, the community was a very different place to how it is now. 10 years ago, with the controversial news coverage of the effects of Afghanistan on the army, many now look at it with negativity. But with coronavirus challenging everyone's lives, are the army going to be looked at differently for fighting the war against this infection? And should we be saluting them and holding them as high as the NHS for their help? We've been reporting from around the UK to ask current soldiers and ex-soldiers their experiences and whether they believe the army are getting the recognition that they deserve. Many join the army for very different reasons. Some may join because their family served, others are looking for an adventure. But all have an influence that caused them to specifically choose the army over any other armed forces. Stuart Green is a veteran who served in the Royal Engineers, who says his home life experiences led to him choosing to sign up for a whole new life.
Yeah, my dad did 22, and when he left, I think I was 17, so I was in college. He struggled really difficult with the transition to civvy life. He had crap jobs. We had no money. I mean, I remember times where they'd go down the back of the sofa to try and get 30p for a loaf of bread. And at the time, I was at college doing art, and as you can imagine, the requirement for materials is quite expensive. So I just got fed up with asking my mum and dad, I need £5 for a new drawing pad or some new paints and things. So on a whim, I just went to the careers office and signed up.
Although the army is the most well known among the general public, there is still the Navy and the Royal Air Force. So out of these options, why choose the army specifically? Is it a weigh out the options decision, or is it a natural fit? David Moore is a technical officer in the Signals Regiment who discusses the reasons why he chose the army for adventure.
I get seasick, so it couldn't be the Navy. And the RAF, unless you're a pilot, and my dad was a pilot, unless you're actually flying the plane, then it kind of makes little sense. You're just there as a mechanic to make sure that those handful of individuals who are all a bit maverick-like have fun, where you get to do all the rubbish jobs. So the army seemed the natural choice, and green was my favourite colour. You only ever get to see that aspect of the RAF, so everyone's focused on the pilots, but they're less than 1% of the Air Force. So behind them, you've got the guys loading the missiles, doing the avionics, fueling the planes, all the other bits that go on that are just not very glamorous, and you just seem to be that everyone's there to support those handful of chosen few that, like knights of the air, fly off to go and have good fun. So it kind of looks like they have all the fun and everyone else is there as support, and that didn't really appeal. I'd rather have been part of the team that's out on the ground.
The British Army's minimum age for enlisting in the force is 16. The UK is the only country in Europe which routinely recruits those under the age of 18. 30% of those who enlisted in 2018 were 16 and 17-year-olds. At this age, many are just learning the ways of life, and with any career, the military have a lot of lessons to give. But signing up young can also bring along regrets. David Moore speaks about the lessons he learned and if he has any regrets on joining young.
The biggest regret I've changed it from last time. Last time it was about the fact that I lost my 20s to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. But I've reflected on that, and actually, whilst my experience is different than other people's, so other people had great time in their 20s, you know, going out and having fun and, you know, getting their first home and house parties and all that kind of stuff that people do in their 20s on their way to being boring middle-aged people. Actually, though mine was different, mine was no less exciting, I think. And certainly, I think if I had to sit down with a counterpart who didn't join the army and talk through our experiences up to this point, I think I'd kind of dominate the conversation. And I think they'd probably spend the entire time sat there going, "You did what? What?"
The community in the army gives soldiers serving the sense of cohesion. Fighting and experiencing the same things pulls people together. Many have described it like a family, a sense of brotherhood, a sense of belonging. Living on base with your neighbours, who are also your colleagues, and being surrounded by the same people every day, building friendships that may last a lifetime. But with changing times and new generations forms a new community. We speak to Stuart Green and Adam Clamp, who both have different experiences of the community, from 20 years ago to the community as it stands today.
So I've been out 17 years, 18 years now, never come close to it. There is, I mean, I guess it's probably even stronger now with what the guys are going through emotionally. You know, that sense of brotherhood, that sense of belonging is only reinforced by hard events, especially if you come through them together. I mean, for goodness sake, we just traveled the world and got pissed and got paid for it. You know, we had a charmed time in the army compared to what it's like now. And we had that sense of brotherhood. As we saw last year when at your dad's funeral, people from all over the country came down. You know, it was a mass gathering. And you'll never get that repeated anywhere else.
It's one of those funny things being in the army, you know. It's like a weird family, you know. You'll be best friends with the guys when you're in station and when you're at work. You know, there's a lot that's been lost over the years that now it's pretty much a 9-to-5 job. So, you know, when you're in work and on exercise, you're all thick as thieves. You know, come the end of the day, you know, and you're all going in your own direction, which actually, is it a bad thing? Not necessarily, because you know, it's quite nice to have your own bit of space and not necessarily have 10 other people piling in your room and gluing your stuff to the ceiling. You know, those days are gone. There's no need for that.
Social structure is demonstrated through the arrangement of institutions, and who you hold respect for depends on what job title they hold. This is the same for the military. A young soldier who may be at the bottom of the ranks wouldn't gain as much respect in theory as someone who is an officer in the army. However, a regiment called the Gurkhas base their respect on a very different structure. David Moore explains.
Everyone knows their place is the best way I'd use to describe it. So they have that numeri system where it's how long have you been in the, you know, in the service, that sets up whether you are Sahab or whether you are subordinate, you know, and they are absolutely rigid on that social structure and making sure that everyone in their class, their caste, their years served is treated with the respect or the reverence in some cases that position deserves, regardless of what they actually do. Which is strange. I mean, we had Nepalese neighbours in our last job, and by actual, you know, what I would consider, he works as a gate guard. So he's literally like just there to press a barrier button on and off. But he had done 24 years in the army, and his social caste was such that he was seen as a community leader.
Wow.
So people would drop gifts off around their house, and you know, he was invited to, you know, all birthday parties, everything. He was there. He was the, you know, the leader, and you know, his wife would organise lots of social get-togethers for all the wives, and it was really good to see. You know, clearly he enjoyed his position of authority because actually he's just a gate guard.
Across the UK, people are coping with fundamentally challenging times in their daily lives. Every day, the public are learning to adjust with the new ways of life lockdown has brought. The social distancing and isolation rules has led to many struggles to carry out their work as normal, some even being placed on furlough. However, the Army has still had to carry on as normal. This important institution is not able to take a day off and has instead had to adjust to the ways they work. David Moore and Adam Clamp talk about the ways COVID-19 has impacted their jobs within the Army.
So where I'm working at the moment in Army headquarters, I'm actually part of the Army Digital Services, and we've actually changed our whole approach from being in the office 9 to 5, 7 days a week or 5 days a week, to we're now all working remotely. There's no one in the offices. We don't need to be in the offices. All of our workload is done over the internet. So I communicate with all my team via virtual chat rooms, Zoom, Skype, those kind of things. We have sort of virtual meetings. And I think the world has changed a lot because of it. We're all having to do that. But is it for the worse? Again, not really. I mean, I quite enjoy being at home and being able to look over and see the kids and stuff. So things have changed. People's understandings of when you're in meetings have all changed, So once upon a time it was all frowned upon if you had a kid talking in the background while you're on a meeting, but now, people just laugh it off because everyone's in the same boat.
How do I think it will change in the future? Will this impact on Army working? Well, yes and no. I think that at the higher formations, it's forced their hand to look at alternative ways of working, dispersed working, using IT more intelligently and not just following the pattern that's gone before. I think that really will drive a change through formation headquarters. For example, PGHQ, Army headquarters, Defence Digital, all those kind of big corporate locations. What it won't do is change regiments, because that's where the rubber hits the road, where you have manpower physically looking after hardware, doing collective training. That there comes a point where you just can't distribute that and achieve the same output. So at regimental level, I can't see it changing. At formation level, I think it will create, by necessity, we've had this forced upon us, and I think that some of the residual good ideas and best practice will start to become more culturally acceptable.
Lockdown is affecting many families during this difficult time. Although we all agree lockdown is essential, the struggle is apparent. Children are not able to attend school and socialise with friends, leaving parents to not only homeschool but also keep their children occupied and free from boredom. Families who may have members classed as vulnerable are also finding themselves on the extremities of lockdown, being confined to 4 walls for the entirety of this time without any promise of when it all could end. Although Army families are used to adapting and dealing with any changes suddenly, they are still similar to other families and are feeling the same struggles. Adam Clamp talks about how his family have felt the pressures that lockdown is bringing.
It means I'm working longer hours and Lou's looking after the kids. And yeah, like, the kids don't really go out of the house that much anymore. That is a complete turn in the world on its head.
Although the lockdown has brought changes among the Army, other national institutions such as the NHS have felt an enormous strain to the way they work under difficult circumstances. A lack of PPE to protect those working from the virus and the increase in patients has seen staff working incredibly hard and coping well under the pressure. The clap for carers is a sign the general public understand these difficulties and appreciate the work being done. However, the Army have also been behind the scenes distributing PPE to these essential workers and transforming the Excel Centre in London into a 4,000-bed hospital that specifically treats the virus, relieving the strain from normal NHS hospitals. With all this work soldiers are doing and more, should we be making more of an effort to commemorate their efforts? Stuart Green tells us why we shouldn't.
Because you don't go into it for glory. You don't. If you want to go into it for glory, you go into the horses' guards where you look really pretty outside the palace. Do you know what I mean? That's if you want that level of recognition and that feeling of adoration from the public, then you go in and do one of the ceremonial bullshit things. The guys who were stood in the testing stations and driving the lorries and flying the helicopters and the planes, They're doing it just because it's their job. You know, I don't think there's any ego there. I don't think they themselves need the Thursday night at 8 o'clock applause, for instance. I think personally, I think that should stay with the NHS because they're the ones who are in the dangerous, vulnerable position. Personally.
From different reasons to joining, to the community, and how this institution has had to adapt to the coronavirus outbreak, all have one thing in common. The spirit of the army is something to be admired. Many join the army because of the adventure it brings. This will always give the sense of belonging, and no matter what life throws at it, it will continue to adapt quickly to serve the country in the most difficult times. The army is something to be respected. The events that occurred in Afghanistan and Iraq were a tiny insight into what can go wrong. 10 years later, and it has proven itself of why this institution is so crucial to the protection of the people. This has been Rhiannon Rae reporting for The Independent.